Hello and welcome to the podcast from Diggers and Dreamers, the organisation that's been the face of communal living in Britain since the 1980s. Whatever kind of intentional community you're interested in, whether it's communes, co-ops, co-housing or anything else, Diggers and Dreamers is where you begin. And now, here's our podcast host, Kirsten Stevens-Wood.
Nat joined Crabapple community in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic as a response to the realisation that there is a difference between comfortable solitude and loneliness. Nat takes us through her journey into intentional community and then provides an overview of the formation and history of Crabapple, from its early days forming in the 1970s in a small farmhouse in Wales to their move to the much larger Berrington Hall just outside of Shrewsbury. Initially based on the ideas of B.F. Skinner, Crabapple started out as a fully income-sharing community. Over time, it has become less income-sharing, but remains fully mutual cooperative, which is deeply committed to ecological practices. The community grow everything organically and aspire to self-sufficiency. Join us to hear all about Nat's journey and the community at Crabapple. Hello and welcome, and today we welcome Nat from Crabapple Community. Hi.
Hi there.
Hello. I'm wondering if you might give us a short introduction to who you are and where you live.
So I'm Nat. I am an archaeologist. I live at Crabapple Community, which is a big house rural community in Shropshire. It's been going for just over 50 years now. And I've lived there for 5 years, since 2021. I really found it by a complete fluke. I wasn't looking particularly for a community, but it was post-COVID, post-pandemic. Things were still very weird. And I'd moved from my previous job, my previous flat, just about 6 weeks before the first lockdown happened.
Oh, gosh.
And I'd left everyone and everything I knew behind and taken on this new contract, at least 100 miles away from anyone I knew. And 6 weeks after I started the new job, they declared the first lockdown. And so I was completely stranded. Even my line manager wasn't allowed to contact me because she was on furlough, and because I was on a temporary contract, they couldn't furlough me. And so I really, having lived on my own for 10 years previously and loved my own company, I really learnt the difference between solitude and loneliness. And I found myself completely alone. And it wasn't a pleasant experience. People had such different experiences of lockdown.
Yeah.
Some people loved it, but mine wasn't. And during that time, I sort of figured out that one of the most important things to me was community, and was to be with people of not exact like mind, but similar people, and just to have that sense of, family, community around me. And so I was at my sister's, who's in Shrewsbury, for Christmas and New Year, and they declared another lockdown. So I got stuck there. And when it lifted, we went on a yoga retreat, and there just happened to be someone at this yoga retreat in Scotland who was living at Crabapple.
Oh, you're
And she was a long-term visitor,
Yeah.
living in a little cabin at the end of the garden. And she said, "Oh, Nat, you would love this place. They're always looking for gardeners, they're always looking for volunteers, and they've got vacancies." So when we got back to Shrewsbury, I messaged and said, I've had lots of allotments over the years, and I really enjoy gardening, and I'm interested in community living. Can I come along? So I went along and volunteered on their gardening days and got to know some of the members. And I was at a complete loose end. I had no job, the contract had ended, the accommodation had gone with the job. And so I was just sofa surfing. I was just staying with friends and relatives, no idea what was going on with my life. And then this was sort of, dropped into my lap.
Had you done any research into community living before that? Like, was it on your radar, something you thought about?
It was, yeah. I'd always been interested. I mean, the little PowerPoint you showed of all the old Diggers and Dreamers volumes the other evening, I had some of those, the little pocket ones, in the 90s, and was always interested. When I first moved to Nottingham, I actually went and visited a housing co-op there, thinking I might move there. But never quite found the right fit or the right time in my life to go for it. But yeah, always been interested.
So you made your way to Crabapple. Can you, because there'll be lots of people who don't, who maybe are interested in what it looks like, how much land have they got, what are the buildings like? Can you give us an audio tour?
Yes. So it's a big old Georgian rectory, a big square block essentially, built in 1805 for one of the sons of the local gentry, who was the rector of Berrington parish, and he lived there with his family and numerous servants and gardeners. So it's a typical Georgian rectory. It's a listed building which comes with its own challenges. And it's in 20 acres of land. The community bought it in 1977 for an absolute song. We've got the original estate agent's particulars in the archive, and it cost 49 grand.
That's amazing.
Believe it or not. People just couldn't get rid of those houses in those days. And it's got a stable block, and it's got a walled garden. So we have woodland, we have fields where we have events. Lots of woodland, walled garden, other growing spaces. When the community first moved in there, they ran it very much like a traditional farm. So they had livestock, they ploughed the fields, they produced food on a large scale. And it's very different now. We manage it a lot for biodiversity and for the animals who live on the land, as well as for the people.
It's quite a lot of land. That is a lot of land. Have you had to make some, choices about how you manage that amount of land? And do you use, I don't know, for example, do you use permaculture principles? How do you make those decisions?
Definitely, and the way the land has been managed has changed a lot over 50 years. But it's always been organically managed or pesticide free. So we manage the woodland, we coppice the woods, we have a willow plantation that we cut and sell for basket making. We do use permaculture principles and no dig, and we've held permaculture design courses previously. We've got a little forest garden. We're trying to live lightly, essentially. The sort of ethos of the community, I suppose you would say, is sort of ecological. So we're not a religious community or particularly ideological, although in the 70s when it first started, it really was quite ideological. They had very strong principles, I suppose. I wouldn't go as far as to say rules, but strong principles about income sharing. They had a labour credit system.
Oh, do you know much about that? Can you, maybe tell us a bit of the detail?
Yeah, so the founder members were inspired by B.F. Skinner's Walden Two novel, particularly as it had been applied to Twin Oaks in the States. So they wanted to set up essentially a British Twin Oaks. But it was two couples that started it off, and they initially had a farmhouse in Wales for a couple of years, and they ran a Whole Foods shop in Shrewsbury. And so when this property came on the market, it was nearer to Shrewsbury, it had more land, room for expansion, so they moved there. They created a sort of internal mortgage to buy it and then paid it off over the years. And so they followed the Walden Two concept, which was about full income sharing and this labour credit system, which was fiendishly complicated, where every aspect of life, from milking the cows to doing the laundry, was ranked with a system of points. And every week they were planners and managers,
Yeah.
and they had to calculate how many credits each task would be worth each week on a system of priority. So things that were unpleasant, like cleaning out the toilets or looking after the children, had a higher score than pottering about in the garden. So you had to do fewer hours of the worst tasks to accrue your credits, 50 credits for the week. And because it was full income sharing, all you got was £5 pocket money.
Well, yes, £5. But was that would have been in what, the 1970s?
That was probably in the early 80s. Yeah, it fizzled out quite quickly. I think it was too complicated.
And I think, to be fair, even some of the other, like, I've got a feeling that Twin Oaks has kind of gone, you know what, that's really hard. Let's just go. You know, they've adapted their systems over time. So at what point did was it a gradual shift away from income sharing, or how did that all work?
I think so. I think the labour credits went first, and then the income sharing gradually sort of dwindled. And they still did run the shop for a long time, the Whole Foods shop in Shrewsbury, and worked initially completely either in the house, on the land, or in the shop. You know, nobody had outside work. But I think gradually, as members came and went, and the world has changed around it, and sometimes the community's ahead of the curve and sometimes it's following behind. But people started to want to have outside work, and by the early 90s, they decided to actually constitute it rather than as a commune, but as a housing co-op. So it's a fully mutual housing co-op now. It still is.
Okay, so some people might not kind of have their heads around what's the difference between commune is a really tricky one, but, like, you know, what is a fully mutual housing co-op and how does that work for its members?
I mean, I'm not sure I'm qualified to say what the dictionary definition is, but how it works is essentially we pay rent to the co-op. So once you're a full member, you are also a director of the co-op. So we're our own landlords, which is a bit weird. But we pay rent to the co-op, and then we decide as a collective how we're going to spend the rent. Because the great thing is the early members paid off the mortgage, and we're standing on their shoulders, because it means that every penny raised by our rent goes back into maintenance of the house and things like that. And we all pay the same, so every adult pays the same amount. So it's a really good system. We set our own rent, so we keep it quite low. But there is also a community time commitment in terms of putting in 2 to 3 days work a week on community, whatever it is, tasks. It could be cooking, it could be baking bread, it could be gardening, it could be working with volunteers. So that sort of balances out the time commitment to the fact that we pay quite cheap rent.
So it's almost like an exchange of, well, I'm going to call it quality of life. You know, the low rent enables you to also engage in less, I'm guessing, paid external work, so that you also are able to spend time in community, do all of those things. You know, you just said baking bread, that sounds amazing. You know, does it feel like you've exchanged, I don't know, do you feel like you've kind of changed the pace of life or the priorities? How has it impacted how you live?
I mean, it can be a bit frenetic during the growing season, and we have residential volunteers as well through the woofing scheme. So we have between 2 and 4 volunteers staying with us from February right through to November.
Oh, wow.
So there's always something to be done. There's never not work to do. But the way I see it is, you know, when I lived on my own and went out to work, when I came home, what I did was cook dinner, bake bread, do the laundry, go to the allotment, all those things. And so actually the community tasks are really just the work of being a human. They're just doing things. So I don't mind at all. I love it. And I think we're very flexible, so nobody's clocking you in and out.
Mm-hmm.
There's nobody keeping tabs. We don't have the planner managers anymore. And so it allows for a lot of flexibility. So I sometimes work away, other members are self-employed or work seasonally. So it just gives you a bit of flexibility to, make your hours work around whatever else you're doing.
Yeah, that sounds really good. You mentioned just a minute ago that you have woofers. So for anybody who hasn't engaged in that level of thing, so woofing stands for willing workers on
worldwide opportunities
That's
on
it.
organic farms.
It
It keeps
changed.
changing.
No longer willing workers. But it is about people who can come in through the WWOOF programme, which is available online, and volunteer. And not only at your community, actually, at quite a lot of different... In fact, I've got a feeling that on the Diggers and Dreamers website, there's a little icon if a community takes woofers. So do you accommodate your woofers? Do you have a system for looking after them? Do you have return people every year? How does that all work?
We do. So it's brilliant because there's a sort of hardcore of us members, the 9 adults at the moment in the house. And then we have this sort of rolling programme of new and interesting people come through the door on a weekly basis. Most woofers come for 2 or 3 weeks. And in exchange for working with us, and it's very much they are experiencing being part of the household, they work with us, they're not kind of sent off to work in the fields while we lord it over
servants.
them. It's very much an exchange, and so they get bed and board essentially. We really don't work them too hard. We start at 10, we finish at 4. There's lots of tea breaks, and we often have film nights or board games or making activities, or we all go off to do something together. And we get a lot of internationals as well as UK volunteers, so people who are often touring around Britain and visiting lots of different places, so they come and stay with us. And we do have regulars who come every year for 2 or 3 weeks, and you build up a really nice relationship with them, and some of them bring their kids along, so you get to see them growing up as well. It's a really good scheme, and often they bring their expertise to us as well, so they might come to learn about growing or community life, but they often have their own passions, their own interests, their own expertise that they can share, and it's really nice.
It is. I know that some people would suggest that for those communities that are able to host woofers, it's also a really good way for someone to get an insight into how a community works and the rhythms of that, and sort of an opportunity to go and have a compare other communities.
That's true, and it's a good way to recruit new members also. I mean, our newest member started off woofing with us.
Oh, so, that's really good.
Yeah.
So you're building, so you said you're 9 adults
Yes.
right now, but you have capacity for, what sort of size could you potentially grow to?
We've got room for about a dozen adults in the main house.
Yeah.
And then there's the stable block, which is partly converted. Obviously, because it's a listed building, there's loads of planning hoops you have to jump through. But potentially, if some people wanted to kind of push that forwards and make more accommodation, then the community would support that and facilitate that to happen. So we could expand beyond that.
That's the joys, isn't it, of kind of, there is that responsibility of community ownership, as in, as you said earlier, you're the one, it's on you, you're the ones who have to save up if there's a hole in the roof or if the windows fail. But also, actually, you've got this amazing resources of woodland and land and a stable block that you have the potential to be able to shape that accordingly. This just sounds amazing.
Well, we're cursed with the P word of potential. I last year it was the community's 50th anniversary, so founded in 75, it was 2025. So we had a whole programme of events, workshops, and then a get-together for former members and current members in the autumn. And I took the opportunity to do some interviews like this with former members. And that was one of the things that one of the former members said is, you're cursed with potential here, because it's very easy to look around and go, oh, wouldn't that be fantastic? But things move slowly. We do full consensus decision making, so that means that it's a very thoughtful and considered process, but it can be glacially slow.
So just very briefly, if it's possible to do it briefly, consensus?
So there's lots of different models for decision making, and they've been tried and tested over the years in different ways. And the most obvious one would be majority voting, which I think they did do. The Crabapple members did do majority voting early on, because I've looked through all the minute books and the archive papers, and they had majority voting on things. But now I'm not sure if it's connected to the housing co-op, if that was when it shifted or at what point in its history. But we do full consensus, which means every major decision has to be unanimous. Everybody agrees. And although it can be slow, it's a really good way of making sure that nobody gets left behind, and that nobody, that resentment doesn't build up, that nobody is particularly disgruntled because the vote didn't go their way. If you look at party politics, that's a model of how it doesn't work. And if somebody doesn't agree with it, then we go back and talk it through and come up with a compromise, come up with a solution. And you don't have to love it. I mean, that's the thing with consensus. You just have to be able to live with it.
Okay, if you've got it doesn't have to be a real example, but like how would that decision kind of travel through,
I mean, a really kind of mundane example is we needed to buy a new chest freezer because we have a lot of fruit. We produce a lot of fruit and other veg and things, and so it's really handy to be able to freeze it. So we agreed in principle at one of our weekly meetings we were going to buy a new freezer, and then someone was tasked with the job of going away and researching it, because obviously we are ecological, so we try to pick the best quality for the lowest emissions and production costs and shipping costs, and all those things have to be taken into account, energy rating, all of that stuff. And also it's an old house, so will it fit through the door? Is there a little niche that it will fit in? So and then they bring that information back to subsequent meetings and we discuss it. Is this a good idea? Will it fit? Could it go somewhere else? Do we need two smaller ones? Does it need to be upright? There's a million variables, which if it was just you buying a freezer, you'd probably just scroll for a bit and then click. But this took months. We do now have the new freezer, which is great. It's in place. And we're now looking at buying another one.
So successful.
And I mean, if you had major objections, that's the thing. It's unlikely anyone's going to have a major, existential crisis about buying a new freezer. But if it's a new member, for instance, or a particularly, it could be something contentious. And that's when you have to, you have to build the consensus.
So thinking, and again, I definitely don't want real examples here, but your member process, that also goes through the decision-making process. So if somebody wanted to join Crabapple community, what happens? What's the kind of, how does that start?
So the process, at the very beginning it can vary. It might be somebody who's volunteered with us, who's just expressed an interest. It could be that we've put a call out for membership applications, or it could be somebody's just emailed us on spec and said, I found you on Diggers and Dreamers, I'm interested, can I come and visit? So initially what we do, we've got a membership pack which outlines what it's all about, our broad worldview, what it means to live there on a day-to-day basis. And it asks a set of questions, basically. So we gather a bit of information about the prospective member, and we give them a bit of information about us.
What sort of things do you need to know about people?
I mean, basic biographical stuff and a
Yeah.
bit about worldview, I suppose, because that's a key thing, is that you've got to be roughly on the same page. But also sort of expectations, what motivated them to want to live in community, have they lived in community before? Just to sort of find out a little bit about them and what their suitability would be. But to be honest, you can never tell from it on the page. It's like a job application, really. Until you meet someone, you don't know. So we try and get them in to visit. And if they're local, they might just come for a day. They might come and join one of our community gardening days, for instance, or maybe come for a weekend stay. And then if it works and everybody likes them, we'll invite them back for a longer visit. And this can go on for several months.
Which isn't unusual, actually. I know there are lots of communities who do insist on a number of slightly long, like not just a day, that there has to be a bit of overnight and maybe even a temporary period.
Yes.
So you invite people back.
We invite them back, then they might come for a week or even longer, depending on their circumstances. And then if they've maybe had 3 visits and it's all going well, then might offer them a probationary membership, which is a 6 months trial period. You essentially live as a member of the community, but at the end of it, there's a sort of no strings. Either side can say, this isn't working out, and that's the end, or you are upgraded to a full member.
An upgrade. So how does that work its way? How does that make its way through your decision? So you've got someone, they've come along, they've done let's say they've covered a whole weekend, or they've woofed for a week, and they're like, yes, we'd like to make our application more formal. So does that go to a community meeting?
Yeah, so on our agenda for our community meetings, we always have a membership section. And so we will talk about any prospective members that have visited. We usually have a sort of go round where everybody gets a chance to voice their thoughts and opinions, and if everybody's happy about them, we'll invite them back. And sometimes people might have reservations or just say, I was away that weekend, I didn't really get a chance to spend enough time with them, so I think we need another visit. So it is protracted, but it's so important, because you're going to see that person at breakfast every day for the next however many years.
Yeah.
So you've got to be as sure as you can be that they're going to fit in, and that that we're going to fit with them as well.
Yeah. Okay. So they get the 6 month probationary period, and you've said fairly early on that there is a requirement for people to be able to contribute. So it's not just a really beautiful place to live where other people do the gardening. Actually, it is about living in community.
It is.
So so you have a requirement, as do many communities actually, that there is a commitment to living in community, which includes not working excessively externally. So how do you manage that? Is that a sort of a gentle nudge, or is that this is a hard line for us?
I think we're really upfront about it from the beginning. You can't have a full-time job and live in the community. Some people work full-time but seasonally, so if you work in some sort of gardening or agricultural work, you might have a season where you're flat out, and then you might have a quiet spell over the winter, and you can do more, and you can shift the balance to suit you. But it is a community commitment, and members are expected to come to meetings, weekly meetings. We eat together, so every evening, 6:00, the bell rings, an amazing spread is put in front of you, and we have a rota. So basically, about once a week, it's your turn, and you cook dinner for everybody. We're a majority vegan community, so dinner is vegan as standard, but people are free to, add to that, and there's a separate kitchen for anyone that wants to eat sort of meat, fish or eggs. So it's quite flexible from that point of view. And then the range of communal tasks are very varied. So some people find that they're better at the admin side of things, or they've got skills to do with carpentry or house maintenance or woodland management, volunteer coordinating. So we sort of spread it all out as much as we can between us. We also try to encourage sort of skill sharing, so you don't get locked in one particular role.
So if your skill is, I don't know, volunteer coordinator, actually you might say, come spend a day with me, I'll show you how it all works.
Yeah, there's an element of that, or just to try and, I'm interested in coppicing the hazel, but I've no idea how to go about it, so I'll shadow the member who is doing that. I don't know that we're 100% good at it, because the tendency is for someone who's got the skills and the know-how just to crack on and do it, especially when there's so much always on at the same time. And we like to share. If we have volunteers staying, we often teach them how to make the sourdough, or get them involved in the cooking. Sometimes they'll help with childcare. So there's a whole variety of things going on, and we host events as well, so there's always something happening.
Childcare's an interesting one. I know it's always a difficult one to navigate sometimes in community, because sometimes people will arrive at communities with different expectations actually. So sometimes people will arrive with the, this is great, the community are now going to raise my children, and actually in reality that isn't the case. So living, or at least my observed experience is that living in community quite often means children do have an extended family experience, but it's not necessarily that they then become kind of gifted to the machine, as it were. So how does that all work in Crabapple?
Yeah, it has changed over the years again. I mean, that's why it's been so interesting to look back over the 50 years that the community's been going, because I think in the early days they did do communal childcare, and they did, they rotated it in, and you were expected to spend half a day each week or whatever playing with the kids or teaching them something, and even to the point that they had bedtimes on a rota, I think, at one point, so that different adults would put the kids to bed at night.
Oh, okay.
And I think that there was a bit of a red line there for some parents, that actually, especially if they've been out at work, they wanted to come home and spend their quality time with their own children. Yeah. But of course it was much more radical in the beginning. They tried really hard to dissolve the structures of the nuclear family and the 2.4 kids and the outside world. They were trying very hard to kind of break that up.
Those kind of feminist influences.
Breaking up the gender roles. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So at least ostensibly they were trying to break those things up. But in practice it had multiple facets, I think. And so over the years it's become more that a family group is maintained as a family grouping, but the kids interact with all the different adults and the volunteers. It gives them a really rich experience and just to learn from so many different people. And it was lovely. I interviewed one of the children who is now an adult, a young adult at university, about her experience of growing up at Crabapple, which was lovely. And, she said it was just such a wonderful place and so free, because you've got all that land, you can go and run about and play with your siblings, or there's always events happening and other kids turning up. It's idyllic, really.
Do you have alumni? you know, young people who've gone off to do something, you know, like set up their own community or have joined other communities.
I don't know if they've joined other communities, but certainly, you know, I think they've taken something away from that upbringing, which, yeah, it's added something to them as people, and an added dimension. And I did ask her if she thought she might live in community in future, and she was up for it. So it hasn't put her off, hasn't scarred her for life, clearly.
That sounds great. If somebody wanted to, so I know that you've been working on the 50-year anniversary for Crabapple, and as you've just mentioned, you've done quite a lot of interviews with previous members and people who've passed through. Is that publicly available?
It's not.
Okay.
We had a lot of, well, not a lot of discussions, but we did discuss when I started going through the archive and planning to do these interviews. We discussed how and why and where these things were going to take place. And we sort of came down on the side of keeping it almost in-house and only using sort of extracts for public availability. Some of it was a kind of a sense of protectiveness, really, that we're holding the life histories of past members. There's a responsibility to those people's stories, and some of them aren't any longer in contact or may no longer be alive, so you do feel a sense of a duty of care, I suppose, to look after that and to not necessarily just put it all on a website or something. And also with the interviews, I asked all the former members about the archive and what they thought, you know, how should we preserve it for the future? Did they have anything to contribute, which was great, added a few bits. And whether or not they were happy to be quoted. So what I've done is taken extracts from some of the interviews and then used them for presentations and publications and things like that. And they were all happy as long as they were credited. None of them even wanted to be anonymous. They were very happy to be quoted. And I think it's a self-selecting thing. You know, if you're happy to come and talk to somebody, then you're probably happy for it to be listened to.
And do I remember, because I think I was reading something that you wrote for the latest Diggers and Dreamers directory. So there's a chapter in the most recent, the 13th edition of the Diggers and Dreamers, which is an overview of Crabapple's 50th. And I seem to remember, have you got someone quite well known who was one of your sort of former members?
Well, we did have Brian Eno's then wife, Sarah Eno. She was one of the founders.
Oh, okay.
So, yes, she wasn't able to make it to the 50th get-together. I think she living in Spain or somewhere now. I think so. But I mean, former members, you know, somebody who lived at Crabapple, one of the early members, still lives at Twin Oaks, I think. And so there's been some cross-pollination between different communities, but a lot of people still live in the local area, which is quite nice, and formed networks of friends through the community's movement, and still kind of maintain those friendships today, and are very happy to come back and visit. And so we do sort of have alumni in that sense of past members who drop in occasionally and come over for solstice or whatever. So
that sounds lovely.
Yeah.
So just coming back to sort of your experience of community, you know, you started this out by telling us about, you know, that journey of that. And I think it's really telling, actually, the difference between living alone in a contented way and loneliness, and that they are two really different things. So we, you know, if you were to try to distill your experience in community, or even to sort of talk about what you think are the benefits for people in terms of communal living, or ways in which things people should think about if they were considering living communally, what would you advise people to consider?
I mean, I've only got my experience of living at Crabapple to draw on, so I can't speak for all communities, but I think we're very fortunate because we've got space. We've got room. So we have our own personal space, and it's fascinating to watch. I mean, from a sort of social science perspective, I've sometimes got my anthropologist hat on when I'm thinking about how we use space or how we interact or how objects flow around. And I do think that having your own personal space is really important, and having places that you can go where you can just get away from it all. But also, I'm very fortunate to live there during a period of great stability, and I think we are very supportive and nurturing. There's always somebody around for a chat. Different people have the skills of, if you need a big talk, or if you've got an issue, a question, you know who to go to, and it's not always the same people. But it's not like a family, because it's like it's a family that you've chosen in that sense. And I mean, we work at it. We do try hard to check in with each other, to support each other, and to kind of try and work together as a whole, to set our priorities and to sort of work towards them. And I think so, having enough space, being deliberately and overtly supportive, and having not necessarily structures in place, but being part of that kind of communal routine is to check in with each other and to ask, do you need support? What can we do? And to some extent also being aware that there are external sources of help available as well. So it might be, things like the Radical Roots Network, or, Diggers and Dreamers, all these sorts of more outside networks are there to draw on. So there's the experience of other people, but you might need an outside facilitator to come and mediate in some sort of disagreement, or you might need advice about insurance or finances and things like that. So not to be too insular. And I think the fact that most of us have outside jobs and interests as well is hugely important. It's not monastic and we're not closed in. It's like you go out and you do your thing, and then you bring it back, and it's a fresh breath of fresh air, and you've got something to talk to people about. Because 2 of the people I interviewed, they both said the same thing. It's like being married to 10 other people at once.
Careful, we might be veering into stereotypical worlds here.
Yeah, but it is. I think it's like any relationship, is to keep it fresh and interesting. You've got to work at it. You can't just plonk yourself in it and expect it to work. It's an ongoing process.
Do you find that sometimes people do come with unrealistic expectations? Not necessarily your current members, because they're already in and it's working, but sometimes people come with unrealistic expectations. They think that it's going to be the answer to whatever problem. I mean, I remember, I can't remember if it was reading, I read somewhere, somebody said, don't think that community will fix your marriage. And I think that's probably very good advice.
Well, yeah, I think, like the song says, you can't run away from yourself. Essentially, wherever you go, you are taking yourself and everything that comes with that with you. And sometimes we get applications from people who are quite clearly expecting this sort of utopian vision that it's going to just, everything will click into place. But I think after a couple of visits, we've probably dispelled that notion that actually it's imperfect and it's chaotic sometimes, and it works, but there's no magic in it. It's like everyone's doing their bit, and at the moment at least, you can never say that it's going to last forever. Yeah. But we have had a lovely period where it's been great.
That does sound good. So if someone was looking to join, not necessarily Crabapple, but maybe a community, What would you say to them?
I'd say go for it. You know, I think there's a lot of waiting and dipping your toe in the water and being a bit reticent. And I just think just do it. Just throw yourself in and see if it works, because ultimately you won't know until you've tried it. I wish I'd done it years ago now, because I think it suits me, but it wouldn't suit everybody. So you'd soon find out if it's not for you.
And would you say maybe do some visits, or just what about matching?
I do think go round and visit various different ones, because, you know, the umbrella of intentional communities is actually a very broad church. You know, there's so many different forms, different models, different financial models, decision making, sort of worldview or ethos. So finding people that are on roughly the same page as you, I think, is really important. And yeah, I mean, fair play to people that are setting their own up, because again, that's just, that's another whole layer, isn't it? So.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, I'd say go for it, because how else are you going to find out? I just think, try it and see.
Brilliant. I think that's a really good place to wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining us on the Diggers and Dreamers podcast.
Thanks, Kirsten.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from Diggers and Dreamers, the go-to place for intentional communities in Britain. As ever, it really helps us if you like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget, you can find out more about communal living at our website, diggersandreamers.org.uk. There you'll find an online directory of existing communities and developing groups within the UK, plus interactive notice boards and information about our publications. One you won't want to miss is the Diggers and Dreamers directory, which has been referred to as the Communard's Bible for 35 years. And now, to play us out, here are the Spaceheads with their tribute to our old mate, Gerard Winstanley. See you next time.